People are very loyal to their societies. People are very invested in their societies. And, certainly well beyond the education, so much happens face to face in terms of holding committee meetings. I know you all have this, leadership gatherings that we have with international global societies that travel and make that effort to come to our meeting to not only engage in the education, but to have discussions about advancing the specialty on a global level. Those are things that are very difficult to replicate in the virtual environment. And I think that if you would ask the four of us what our biggest concerns are in terms of putting together virtual meetings, is how you establish that. How do you continue to do that important work of volunteers? How do you continue to recognize people appropriately for lifetime accomplishments and awards, and have that interaction even between our staff?
Hi, I'm Dr. Steve Elias, and welcome to the veinPODCAST. Respect the elders, embrace the new, and encourage the improbable and impractical without bias. Welcome, everyone, once again to the veinPODCAST with Dr. Steve Elias, sponsored by Radcliffe Vascular. Our motto, of course, is respect the elders, embrace the new, encourage the improbable and impractical without bias. And that's what we tried to do. This podcast is something, again, that a year ago, none of us probably thought we'd even have a podcast to discuss something like this. But we've entitled it Brave New World 2021. And we're going to talk about the challenges to society meetings. We've had some podcasts in the past of non-societal meetings, such as the Venous Symposium, Expert Venous Management, International Vein Congress, Charing Cross, et cetera. But society meetings have a different challenge than non-societal meetings. And with us today is Ken Slaw. Everybody's, I'm assuming, the executive director of their respective organizations and societies. So Ken Slaw is from Society of Vascular Surgery, Dean Bender from the American Vein and Lymphatic Society, John Forbes from the American Venous Forum, and Erica Holland from the Society of Interventional Radiology. And everybody here either is specific to vein disease or has a large portion of their meetings about vein disease. And meeting just doesn't have to be about vein disease, but and most of the questions are not about veins in particular, but about the challenges of societal meetings during this time. Aldous Huxley wrote the book, Brave New World, back in 1932, and it was really about a dystopian society. I had some idea what dystopia meant. It comes from the Greek, but I'm not going to say I knew what it meant, and I kind of looked it up. And it's really a community or society that is undesirable or frightening. And I think we all might agree that the state we're in for our meetings now is not what we desire, and at times can be somewhat frightening as well. So, Ken, when was the last time the SVS had a 100% live meeting, in-person live meeting?
Yeah, that was in June of 2019.
Okay,
So,
we're talking a while ago here. Oh, Jesus. Where was it?
So let's see, June of 2019. I almost can't even remember, but we were in National Harbor in DC.
In DC, okay. And you're glad you're not in DC now, I'm assuming, for your meeting.
Well, it'd be exciting, but yes, at this particular time, I'm glad we're not in DC this year.
Okay, and Erica, SIR, last time?
Our last in-person meeting for our annual scientific meeting, our largest event, was in March of 2019 in Austin, Texas. We did have a smaller program in January of 2020 in San Francisco, right as reports were coming in about the potential for a pandemic. So we snuck one in, but our scientific meeting was scheduled for March of 2020 in Seattle, which clearly being one of the epicenters made it quickly evident to us that that would not happen. So we moved to a virtual after that.
Yeah, no, and I was part of that meeting, and that worked out fairly well. But still, I mean, the point is, a long time ago. Dean,
It was.
Yeah.
Dean, when was yours?
So for the AVLS, our last in-person was October 2019. And that was in Phoenix. In
Yeah.
fact, it was your meeting.
Yes, I know. Right. It was my meeting, and I'm glad I didn't have to deal with a virtual one the next year. It's much easier, a live meeting. Now, John, I saved you for last because AVF, we kind of like snuck in there. Talk about the last meeting and when that meeting was.
Yeah, I have three quick stories. Our meeting was in Amelia Island, March 3rd to March 6th this year. When our president,
in 2020.
this year, I'm sorry, 2020. When our president was flying, he was on the airplane flying from Baltimore to Jacksonville, he got word from his hospital that all meetings were, travel to meetings was being canceled. He was on the way to the meeting. Same thing with our treasurer. He had the same message from his hospital in New York that all meetings were being canceled, but he was already on his way. The other quick story is while we're at our meeting, now we're at the meeting for 4 days. The second day, the hotel starts bringing out hand sanitizer spray bottles because it wasn't apparent to us that there was a big problem on that first day of our meeting, which was March 3rd. And all of a sudden, this thing started to grow and climb, and it became very visible.
No, yeah. So I was at that meeting also, and we were kind of joking, semi-joking, like, we didn't understand the seriousness of what was to come, right?
Right.
I mean, don't you remember we were all walking around making kind of funny
Right.
comments?
Right. And one of our keynote speaker was trapped. He's from Cyprus, Greece. And when he was flying back from Florida, he had to go through England and couldn't get out of England for almost 3 months to get home. This is Dr. Nicolaides. So we've all had those experiences. I haven't heard of anybody from that meeting who contracted COVID, except for me.
Oh, really?
About a month ago.
Oh, but that's a month ago.
Oh, not related to the meeting.
No, unrelated.
No, so the point of this, I mean, we've really been dealing with this a long time now. And so Ken, your first virtual meeting then, when was that?
So that was June of 2020. So we were planning, as everybody was, to make a pivot as quickly as we could once we realized that there was no chance that we were going to be able to have a face-to-face meeting in June. Of course, at that time, this was all new to us, and everyone was trying to learn and figure out what was going on. But we actually formally made the decision mid-March that we were going to have to go to a full virtual annual conference. So we had 60 days to take the annual conference in its entirety as a live event, pivot, and create the platforms and deliver it virtually in June.
Yeah. So keep that thought in mind as we go forward. And Erica, yours was really in March 2020. So
So we in early March had those really serious conversations with our leadership about what we needed to do. Obviously, the way things unfolded, our course was pretty clear. We needed to cancel, but we certainly had all of our members, faculty, attendees, corporate partners to contend with in terms of how we would resolve the physical meeting to get everything squared away there, make sure all the communications went out. So we actually did, after all of that was settled, pivoted to a virtual meeting a few months later, which was much abbreviated because we wanted to make sure that we were preserving getting the best science out and content for our members, but much more abbreviated than if we would have potentially met later in the year. So we really focused our attention on getting that content out and then retooling ourselves for the coming year, knowing that in March of 2021, we would likely be virtual, moving our concept to virtual and starting to plan for a full-fledged meeting, which is what we're on the cusp of now. So much abbreviated, but what we could do at the time with the resources available after having to cancel the full meeting with such short notice.
Yeah. Now,
Steve,
go ahead.
can I make a quick comment here? Because the executive directors and those of us that lead medical societies are a pretty tight-knit group, and we communicate and support each other. And SIR was one of the first to have to make this pivot. And one of the amazing things is they were so transparent in sharing what they were going through and the decision-making processes and the stresses, that it really helped every medical society that came after to sort of build from their experience and for all of us to figure out what to do. So I just wanted to take this moment to give kudos to SIR and that transparency and let you know that how important this support and this network is that we all have with each other.
Yeah, no. And I think that's great for everybody to understand that in general, societies are, you guys are not competing with each other. You're supporting each other. And certainly this brought everybody, together. And Dean, you had a little more luxury, and obviously I was involved with that meeting as well, but you had a little more luxury to think about what.
Well, and to build on actually, Ken, your comment, which is tremendous. Mid-March, of course, I came back from the AVF meeting going, oh crap, what are we going to do? And so we immediately declared, October, who knows, will this follow the typical flu cycles, summer kind of dissipate maybe by October before we get back into that, November, December flu season type seasonality that we've seen historically. We said, hey, we'll go hybrid, right? Begin preparing for the virtual, but hold on to the hope of a live meeting. And the nice thing as we went through that, and by the end of June, it was 100% obvious, this wasn't going to happen, that the pandemic, the COVID was going to react differently than we had hoped. And we declared 100% virtual. But by that time, we were ready. But the nice thing was, actually sitting and observing the things that SIR went through, SVS went through, other societies, other meetings that went virtual, and kind of looking and learning of what worked, what didn't. And so, trying to make sure that we addressed those things. And probably the biggest luxury that we had wasn't only the platforms and getting that ready, but was really the ability to communicate. We were able to set up and establish communication meetings, webinars with our corporate, exhibitor base, and share with them, this is what we're doing, how to do it, and give them time to prep and think. So yeah, we felt, hey, we're in a great position being in October to have, at that time from the initial March, almost 5-6 months to prepare for a 100% virtual meeting.
So John, I'm going to skip you to talk about that. I want to ask you the beginning of the next question. When do you think AVF is going to have their next in-person meeting?
We have 2 courses planned for later this year. One we think will be in June and one will be in September. We think both of those will be virtual. The next contracted meeting we have is in Orlando next March. So that's we're contracting for a live meeting, but we have a thing in our contract that we may have to adjust depending on how things go during the year. That's a year from now.
So Erica, do you think March of 2021 you're shooting for that?
So, March of
2022.
I know what you meant. I think we're all very hopeful, but we're cautious. We've gotten as far as confirming through the end of this year that we're not planning any in-person events. It's an interesting question as well, because our March 2022 meeting happens to be planned for Toronto. So we're going to have to, keep our eyes on what those relationships look like, keep apprised, with the Convention Visitors Bureau and others, just to see what type of regulations go into place. I don't think any of us know for sure, but we remain very cautiously optimistic that that will come to pass. But we're certainly, talking with our leadership on a regular basis and really taking it month by month in terms of how we look at the future. I know we all want to get back to it. It's forced us to look at things a different way and maybe seize some new opportunities, but an additional layer of complexity there because we would be crossing borders. So watching that carefully.
So nobody here is thinking anything's happening in 2021 for your societies. Dean? Dean?
Well, go ahead, Ken.
I'm talking about the annual meeting. I'm not talking about smaller things.
Right.
So the SBS Vascular annual meeting was scheduled June 2nd through the 4th this year in San Diego. And, with the stars aligning and a lot of heavy lifting, we were able to move the meeting lock, stock, and barrel from June to the end of August in San Diego without any penalties or any issues, working very closely with the convention center and the hotel. So we are hoping with the vaccine rollout, particularly stressing healthcare professionals, that at least our members will be mostly vaccinated by the end of August. And we're at least hopeful that we'll have some type of component of live meeting. We don't think anything near normal, but there's a tremendous thirst and drive for our members. Something I haven't sensed before in them, to crawl through glass to get to a live meeting. And I think if there's any way to do it safe, we're going to try to have as much of a live event as we can in August.
Okay, so we're August. So Dean.
Okay, so yeah, from AVLS, of course, our annual meeting is October. We're scheduled to be in Denver, Colorado. And so we're actually moving forward with in-person intentions. Of course, more in a hybrid, meaning there will be a virtual attendee with live stream capability, et cetera, in that. However, again, at this point, we're looking at, and we don't actually open registration until the 1st of April, so we still have time to see what happens, and we can always change direction a little bit if need be. But our intention currently is to open that meeting with a limited in-person attendee capacity. And that's based on the rooms that we have contracted, assuming a 6x6 kind of, spreading and all of that. So a meeting that would normally, have somewhere between 800 to 900, 950 attendees, not including our exhibitor. We're looking to open it up and say, look, a max of 475, clinical attendees can come to this meeting. And then everybody else would be virtual. And then if things progress in a positive manner, hopefully, by May or June, we could open that, limit up if demand is out there to do that. But at the same time, with what we've done in 2020, the mechanisms that we have in place, the platforms, all of that, to make a decision to go 100% virtual, we're prepared to do that as well. And that'll be an easy pivot, and hopefully we'll know enough by the end of March before we actually open registration to really make a declaration one way or the other. I really would like to avoid what happened last year, where you're registering for in-person and then you flip, and now it's 100% virtual and all of those things. But that's our intention, is October to have a portion of the attendees in person.
So I mean, and I think all of us, because obviously I run some non-societal meetings, we do feel very comfortable if we have to pivot. If we had an idea that we're going to be alive, that we could just go back to virtual because we've been through it. So that's not as much of an anxiety-producing event as it was the first time around. But can you bring up something that I'm actually quite surprised about, in that you're saying there's a thirst to be live? I mean, one of the questions I have here is, why should, and John's, you jump in on this first, why would somebody want to be at a live meeting now? Not now. Why, with what we've gone through and what we know we can accomplish with not physically being there, why would a member want to take more time off than they would for a virtual meeting, pay more than they would for a virtual meeting for hotel and travel, and let's even take the risk out regarding getting COVID? Why? I was thinking the opposite of what you're saying, Ken. I thought we're going to have trouble in the next year or so getting people to come back to a live meeting. So, John, just the positive and negatives, we'll talk about
Yeah,
it.
I'm the socialization aspect of medical professionals is very significant. So to be together and to be at receptions and be in, past presidents' dinners and those kinds of things is a powerful motivator. It transcends just the academic or the clinical or the learning piece of it. Becomes very, very powerful. So I think that the socialization aspect, the networking aspect are two big drivers why people want to be together. Now, the economics and safety factors now weigh in very significantly. So there'll be a balance of people going, I can't get there, I don't care about socialization. And others are going to go, I want to see my friends. I want to be at that gala. I want to network and socialize. So that socialization is a very powerful driver.
Yeah. So you think that's the driver? I mean, and Erica, I mean, the SIR, I've been there many times. I mean, it's a huge and enormous meeting. You have a lot of people coming there. More IRs than maybe we need in the world, but they're there. So
No, we always need more IRs.
I'm kidding you, Erica. So no,
I know, but I will say that there is a community aspect, and there probably is a great sense of loss when people can't commune together in that way. People are very loyal to their societies. People are very invested in their societies, and certainly well beyond the education. So much happens face to face in terms of holding committee meetings. I know you all have this, leadership gatherings that we have with international global societies that travel and make that effort to come to our meeting to not only engage in the education, but to have discussions about advancing the specialty on a global level. Those are things that are very difficult to replicate in the virtual environment. And I think that if you would ask the four of us what our biggest concerns are in terms of putting together virtual meetings, is how you establish that. How do you continue to do that important work of volunteers? How do you continue to recognize people appropriately for lifetime accomplishments and awards, and have that interaction even between our staff and the volunteers and the members? It's a very important connection point for us to be able to have that sense of community. So we know it's difficult to do that in the virtual environment, but more so than just delivering the didactic education, presenting all of the really critical science, it's building that community and maintaining that connection between all the moving parts that make societies run. And that's really what we're trying to do. And we're experimenting, and we'll maintain that transparency that Ken alluded to earlier, because I think we all need to learn from each other and what works and what doesn't. But it does promote that, spirit of innovation, spirit of experimentation, pilot some things and share best practices.
Yeah, if I can add on to that, Steve. In fact, I just had a conversation with one of my team members on our staff this morning, thinking about what a societal meeting may look like. One of the nice things coming out of October was, of course, everything was live streamed, and we ran a comprehensive meeting, and it was over 80 hours of CME credit on a virtual or on-demand basis, and we saw a lot of people come back, take advantage of that after the fact. And coming back and tying that to this drive for socialization, interaction, and peer-to-peer learning and discussion. What we discussed about, and this was just 6 hours earlier today, of incorporating into our next in-person meeting and going forward, the opportunities to actually drive that kind of, whether small group interaction, and informative discussion, not just the social, having, a cocktail together, that kind of thing, but in a formalized manner, because the actual, scientific content, things that we get out can always be picked back up now in the future in an on-demand basis, right? I want to see this great lecture from Steve Elias. I can watch that at another time. But while we're together, having that opportunity to sit with 5 other peers and talk about cases and this and that and what the latest is. And so I think we're going to start to see coming out of this may even be some different approaches to what we do on the ground in an in-person meeting to really emphasize the peer-to-peer interactions, knowing we can pick up the scientific content digitally after the fact on an on-demand basis.
Yeah, no, and I think that's good, and that's what engages people, in a virtual. It's a lot of it is listening to people interacting, together, and if they're going to be live, and obviously you guys know, the meetings that in general I run, expert venous management and venous symposium, that is the basis. It's all that interactive. It's not a didactic lecture, and I think that's what engages people, because none of us want to sit here watching some PowerPoint presentation about, God knows what. So Ken, let's shift a little bit, because we've had a lot of issues in the podcast I did with the non-societal meetings. We spoke a lot about this, and we, as we all know, industry supports us in a huge way. And there's been a lot of challenges that we all had in convincing industry what their return on their investment's going to be in a virtual or going forward in a hybrid meeting. So talk to me a little bit about what you've heard from industry, Ken, that they might want, what they didn't like that was done, and how are you addressing that to give our big supporters, their stage, so to speak, that they get in person much more than virtually.
Well, I think it's fair to say that there isn't much they liked at all about that virtual format. They love the live interaction. They are pining more than maybe our members are to get back to a time when we could get back to some semblance of business as usual. However, understanding that the new normal or the new reality is probably not going to be with us for a while, and we're going to be reshaping the new normal in some type of hybridized environment or something new that we have yet created. I actually think industry is going to challenge us to really think out of the box about how to engage them in new, innovative ways to create these opportunities for interaction, to create these opportunities to engage differently. We had private meetings with our 14 biggest sponsoring companies at our meeting to have lengthy discussions about this. So the truth is they all did step up because they love the society. They love our members, they want to continue to engage and they want us to be successful. But there is a return that they've got to show in order to maintain that level of engagement. And so I think we all went through sort of round 1 beta testing of virtual environments. And we had digital exhibit halls, and we had lots of opportunities for them to sort of contribute digitally. At least in our evaluations, it fell pretty flat in terms of members getting there and in terms of industry really getting what they were looking for. So they've challenged us to start to think about things like, maybe it shouldn't all be about the annual conference. We ought to think about more of a year-round strategy of engaging and reaching members. maybe we ought to think about our learning management systems and finding new ways to put programming out there to have a bigger presence and recognition of industry and what we're doing. So I think, necessity is the mother of invention, and this is a crucible right now. I think Erica mentioned it earlier. As horrible as this has been to live through, and as we're navigating our way through, I can't help but believe we're all going to be coming out of this with a tremendous sense of innovation and creativity and new ideas going forward, including how we work with industry to support what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. And I mean, I don't like to take much of the conversation. I want you guys to talk, but when we went with the expert venous management and stuff, we innovated that there were actual commercials between each, segment that we had, just like a commercial on TV. I think how much they paid for a Super Bowl commercial for 30 seconds. So industry got, they didn't pay us that much. Don't worry, guys. But no, my point is, in 30 to 60 seconds, you can get a lot of information out to your members and out to people. And that was one thing that was kind of refreshing. But, I've had discussions. I mean, I've been involved obviously with AVLS and AVF in terms of the program committees. John, what are you hearing from industry? And I want to preface this with, Ken, you said industry is challenging us. You know what we also did after some of the meetings I was running? We challenged industry. Tell us what you want also, because we're partners in this. Don't just sit back and say, we don't like what you did, and now, come up with something else. No, let's talk together. What do we all want to do? So, John, what are you doing going forward?
We've had the benefit, Steve, of not having had a virtual meeting yet. We've had the benefit of watching and learning others and their experiences. And so we're saying this has got to be different. We've got to find value and benefits and return that's different than what they experienced at a live meeting. So we have engaged our supporters. We have several of them who sit on the board of our foundation. And so we had several sessions with them about what can work for you. What do you need? So it's about understanding their needs and wants and not trying to take a live thing and trying to create some digital thing without asking them what would benefit your organization. So when you you may save money without traveling to all those parties you host and spend money on, but how can you benefit from this digital virtual experience? So we've asked the question, we've got some good ideas. We've had the chance of looking at others and getting, talking to other people. Our organization is also managed by a management firm, that's not like SVS, SIR, or AVLS, that have their own, in-house staff. And so we were able to pick the brains of our management firm. They managed 30 medical societies. And to be able to sit down and talk to those people and say, what worked, what didn't work? So we're doing some learning, and hopefully we'll be able to bring that forward and create that value we're talking about in our meeting in about 8 weeks.
So let me, Dean, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I had one comment to add. And I think, one of the nice things, John, and, in the position is this thing kind of goes forward because, having come from personally, the for-profit corporate world prior to, taking on this role with AVLS, sitting on the other side of that. So as we got and prepared for October, we had a lot of sessions with them, talked about, and what I saw overall with a lot of the traditional exhibitor supporters was kind of just a timeout, right? This thing's not going to go on forever. We're just going to kind of sit on the sidelines, see what happens. We don't believe there's going to be a huge return. And I didn't see a lot of them engaging as much as we tried to encourage them. You're going to need to step up and look at things different as well. And that's fine because they all hoped it was just going to be, a short time lived problem. We'll worry about it later. We'll go back to normal somewhere in the future. But I don't think a normal is going to happen, right? We started off talking about a brave new world. It's going to be different. And I think, Ken, the conversations you're having, John, as we move forward, you're starting to hear them go, oh, crap. we've actually got to figure this out. It's not going to be like it was in 2019. It just isn't ever going to be that again. And so I think this innovation, as you talked about, we're going to start seeing new innovative ways of engagement, and particularly as societies, where we can engage them with our membership throughout the year. I think it's going to really open up things in 2021 that everybody kind of took the summer off in 2020. So
I just wanted to echo, what Ken said and a little bit what Dean said about taking a time out and having some of these conversations. I mean, obviously our annual meeting programs are of tremendous benefit to our members and our corporate partners, but almost through this year, past year, 2020, having some real conversations about what society efforts and initiatives are, what we're focused on. If you can remove for a moment talking about some of the aspects of a meeting program and really talking about on an annual basis what you're doing, and having some really productive conversations around health disparities that everyone here who's involved in the venous space is certainly aware of, with our corporate partners, quality, research initiatives, physician wellness. What can we learn from our corporate partners about their own wellness and burnout programs? These have been really, really fruitful conversations. And I think it connects us in a different way. And there's value there that people are seeing as well. So it's been really helpful. So thank you for bringing that up, Ken, because I think it's just really critical when we start to talk about the value of our organizations with our partners beyond some of the traditional programs like our meetings.
Yeah, and I think we, as you already said in the beginning, Erica, we have learned a lot going through this year, and we're no question about it. Our meetings going forward are going to be better. I think because of it, as you said, we went through a little bit of pain, and we're just going to get better. But I think we also need to remember that ideas plus technologies are going to step up to make the meetings better. There are probably technologies now that we're not aware of that are going to be able to allow us to engage members and even for non-societal meetings better than we were able to, 6 months or 8 months ago. And I mean, it's just been crazy how it's gotten so much better. What I want to ask also is, why do we need yearly meetings? Why do we need a meeting every year, or why do we need a big meeting every year? Why, you already brought it up, why can't it be just a rolling, ongoing, whatever? Anybody want to jump in on this?
Well, I was going to say, Erica, probably you stated it well earlier about the whole societal aspect of this group's particular meetings, right? We are a membership, right? We are, and even though like our annual meeting, on average is 55-60% of the attendees are actual members, but it's their only chance to really engage and interact, and there is a lot of aspect to, coming together and just seeing friends that you've developed over, years and years of being part of the society. And so I think, it's a lot of that, and maybe add on to that.
I think we are steeped in tradition, and part of that annual meeting and coming together and sharing of science, how they all started in the beginning and in that scholarly level has evolved over time. There's so many celebratory aspects to an annual meeting. I'm sure many of you induct new fellows of your society. You recognize your president, outgoing and incoming. And, we really enjoy that community aspect. But moving forward, we don't know if an annual is right or not. But, that's just the way we've been operating. I don't know about others.
Well, I think the answer always, to this is ask the members. And so I'm sure all of us are going to be doing significant needs assessments and significant evaluations from our members to ask these questions. There are reasons to have an annual conference. The SVS, for example, is the annual debut of the world's, foremost research, advancing, vascular surgery. And so there's a research cycle and a presentation cycle. And the annual conference for the VAM is sort of the coming out party for all the newest late breaking research in the specialty. That being said, I'll bet you anything that of all the programming that goes on at all of our annual conferences, think of all the programming that doesn't make it onto the program and the platform, and the opportunity to extend our annual conferences to really become annual events, right? Year round, education that leads up to an annual conference, but also has content extenders that last throughout the rest of the year. And so these are all things that I think, as you pointed out, Steve, that we're learning. The technologies are creating opportunities. I can tell you, when we did our June 2020, SVS Online virtual, the vendors were struggling to keep up with what we needed to do. What they're doing now, just a year later, they've caught up. The technology's caught up. They're getting better. They're getting better and better at producing these meetings. So, I really do think that these new technologies are going to create the vision and platform for a different concept of annual conference. Truly annual conference that lasts all year round.
But what I'm hearing from all of you, and as we're distilling this down, is you can get out didactic content virtually. That's not that hard to do. And as Dean already pointed out, people can come back and visit it and stuff. It's the social aspect, the human interaction aspect with your members that is hard to create virtually. So perhaps the annual meeting, a lot of the work is done before the physical annual meeting in terms of getting out the data, the information, but then the annual meeting becomes the social aspect of it, coupled with a little bit of, highlight of the scientific things. But it's more this, because you need an identity. As you don't just need an online identity, you need a physical identity that what people look like, and people like to talk to other people and stuff like that. So perhaps going forward, we're not going to replicate exactly virtually a in-person meeting. We're going to create the in-person meeting is going to have a different goal, and the passage of information, the great majority, is going to be virtually, but the goal when everyone's together is going to be, I want to see what you look like, and I want to talk to you, in a physical sense. And maybe that is where this is heading, because I don't see people taking off a full week anymore to get information. Honestly, I think they've seen the advantage of. Go ahead, Gene.
I was gonna add on to that and basically say and agree with you that when it comes to the traditional didactic content, right? They're not, and I think a lot of our annual meetings and what we've learned is that's not the whole reason they go, right? And it's an important factor. It's kind of that I get my certificate, I get my hours, I keep my CME up, all of that's great, dandy, fine, and now I can do that just as well digitally, so I don't need it for that aspect. And I think you're dead on that the culture of the meeting, the climate of the meetings will begin to change.
If I can add one other comment to this, just to point out that it's not all social, that research on CME demonstrates clearly that translational learning in transitioning from content to practice occurs in the hallways, occurs around the dinner tables. And so our annual live meetings may become translational events. where you're right.
How do you promote the organic nature of the scholarly discourse that comes up around the programming in the virtual environment?
Right.
And whether we return to in-person meetings, online, hybrid, somewhere in between, we have to find ways to talk about and implement ideas to promote that organic discussion in the virtual world, because I think that's what we're struggling with when we talk about the social aspects of the meeting. Those are the most difficult to replicate, but the ones that we must pay the most attention to. And I think those are those conversations we're having peer-to-peer right now among leaders of these organizations, both staff and physician, to try to promote, because I 100% can agree with what you just said.
Yeah, no, and I think that's great. And so one thing that you brought up already, Erica, at the beginning, regarding, and Ken, you echoed it, was the transparency and the cooperation. And I think if going forward, all of you, which you will do, can share, what works at everybody's meetings, because none of you are truly, no one's really competing with anybody else in a way. We all have our own members and things like that. It'd just be a better experience for everybody. And for those of us organizing meetings, those of people coming to meetings and stuff, and see where we head. To me, when I'm kind of ending this here, I'm distilling things down. Clearly, we're not going back to a full live meeting. It's clearly going to be a hybrid meeting going forward at some point. Some people are a little optimistic it's going to happen in this year. I'm not that optimistic, but that's fine if we're talking in 2022. Lastly, everybody, think about this. If there was one thing you had complete control over for your next meeting, what is it that you would want to make sure happens? Let's take 5 seconds before I just jump on somebody, because the first person is going to have a harder time than anybody else. So, John.
I'll go first. I think it's, I'll call it, the term is ease of use, but it's the seamless ability to use technology easily, because it's not always easy. Sometimes these Zoom calls don't work. Sometimes that platform fails that you work so hard to produce. Something happens. Sometimes the internet in someone's home doesn't function very well. So it's that seamless technology that can make this work. We've got to find a way to make that better, using technology to create this knowledge and transfer of knowledge better. We didn't know what Zoom was a year ago.
Right.
Look where Zoom is today. So think about the impact of technology is making our lives easier and better. The second comment, real quick, is the executive directors are in a key role, right? The ability for us to share with each other. One of my best learning experiences ever in my leadership journey is when I'm sitting with my counterpart and we're talking the truth to each other. What happened? How do we make it better? So I think this group here, you brought us together, is a powerful group to share that information going forward.
So, Ken, what is the one thing you want to make sure?
Well, so, it used to be that for our annual conferences, it was a conference that for those that attended, and those that couldn't attend didn't take part of the experience. So what if I could wish for one thing, is that we could move into a position where when we have the VAM every year, the entire membership is engaged in some way. We now have the technology. So it's not just those that can make it there, but we could reach out and connect every other member that couldn't make it to engage in some meaningful way. And I think that would be awesome.
Erica.
I would say, just very simply, because our full virtual meeting program is coming in March of this year. And if I had one hope for that meeting program in its virtual, is all of us attend professional meetings of some sort. We have our own professional meetings as society executives. And the whole goal is to leave that meeting feeling reinvigorated, renewed, recharged, and excited. And if we're able to do that for our members in this full virtual meeting, then I would say we'd met all of our goals for this meeting.
And Dean, I can either skip you or let's just skip Dean. What the heck? No,
No, don't.
No, it's fine. Thinking about 2021, and one of these meetings we talked about that's hopeful, for October, probably the biggest thing between now and then that, we kind of need to see happen. And when we were talking, offline before we started this group discussion a little bit, this ambiguity of what's really happening with the vaccine rollout, where will it be, right? We're having to make so many assumptions that we have no control over. And ultimately, what will, our government authorities, put in place? And the sooner, that I can get a clear direction, are things going to change in June, July? And we just don't know. And so, Ken, you mentioned about discussing with the hotel, making the move you guys were able to make. Well, we're in October. They're not having those discussions with us right now, right? Because, the other side of the contract wants this to happen more than we do, right? Kind of thing. But the ambiguity, if we can just get a very clear path on what the vaccination is going to look like. We know most of our attendees will be vaccinated by then, but what about support staff, right? What about exhibitor staff? What about, we have no idea at this point other than a lot of very loose promises coming. And so, if I could get clarity on that one issue of what will we be able to do? Is it 6x6? Is it 3x3? Is it you can only have 10 people in a room, right? And then we can make some very clear decisions and move forward.
So 2021 is going to be, we don't know. We're still learning, but we're getting much better. And all of you, I'm assuming, feel much more comfortable with your next meeting than you did with your first meeting during this. And all of us are. And I think attendees are feeling more comfortable as well. They understand the rules of engagement now better than they did, a year ago. So I think that's really, really good. But it still is a brave new world. It's still a world in transition, and we're going to see where it goes. But I hope the people listening understand that those people who are the administrators of societies are not just, looking at numbers and pushing things around. They're actually thinking about the experience of the members. And I think you guys really brought that out really, really well tonight. So I want to thank you for that. It's a lot of food for thought. Most importantly, anybody who's a member of any of these societies, you got to attend it in one way or the other, however it's going to be. And that's what makes us go forward. So again, thank you all very, very much for this.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Always great to see everybody.
Yeah, guys, really.
Look forward when we can do it in person.
Yeah, that would be nice, right?
Bye, everybody. See you.
All right, good night, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
We hope you enjoyed today's Vein podcast in association with Radcliffe Vascular. We aim to bring you important topics from the vein world, either topics that we ourselves feel are important or you, our listeners, feel are important. So review us on your favorite podcast app or send your thoughts, comments, and questions to podcast@radcliffe.group.com. That's podcast@radcliffe-group.com. You can also register to access newsletters, videos, and peer-reviewed journal articles. Thank you. Glad you listened. This is Dr. Steve Elias, and we'll see you on the next Vein podcast.